I'm Mindy Peterson, host of Enhanced Life with Music podcast, where we explore the ways music can make our lives better. And this is Microhance, a microdose of musical enhancement. I recently ran into a music educator acquaintance who was telling me about an incredible speech that had been given to incoming freshmen and their parents at Boston Conservatory. He sent me the link, and as I read the transcript of this speech, I had wave after wave of goosebumps the entire time. I wanted to share some excerpts from this welcome address given by Karl Paulnack on September 1st, 2004. Shout out to Dr. Mark Whitlock at University of Minnesota Duluth for sending this my way. I'll put a link in the episode notes to the full transcript of the speech, which I highly recommend you read for full inspirational and goosebump effect. But here are some of the highlights. One of my parents' deepest fears, I suspect, is that society would not properly value me as a musician, that I wouldn't be appreciated. I had very good grades in high school. I was good in science and math. And they imagined that as a doctor or a research chemist or an engineer, I might be more appreciated than I would be as a musician. I still remember my mother's remark when I announced my decision to apply to music school. She said, "You're wasting your SAT scores." On some level, I think my parents were not sure themselves what the value of music was, what its purpose was. And they loved music. They listened to classical music all the time. They just weren't really clear about its function. So let me talk about that a little bit, because we live in a society that puts music in the, quote, arts and entertainment section of the newspaper. And serious music, the kind your kids are about to engage in, has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with entertainment. In fact, it's the opposite of entertainment. Let me talk a little bit about music and how it works. The first people to understand how music really works were the ancient Greeks. And this is going to fascinate you. The Greeks said that music and astronomy were two sides of the same coin. Astronomy was seen as the study of relationships between observable, permanent, external objects, and music was seen as the study of relationships between invisible, internal, hidden objects. Music has a way of finding the big, invisible, moving pieces inside our hearts and souls and helping us figure out the position of things inside us. Let me give you some examples of how this works. Karl then goes on to give examples from a World War II concentration camp in Nazi Germany and from 9/11 in the US. And he concludes, art is part of survival. Art is part of the human spirit, an unquenchable expression of who we are. Art is one of the ways in which we say, I am alive and my life has meaning. Karl goes on to say, I have come to understand that music is not part of, quote, arts and entertainment, as the newspaper section would have us believe. It's not a luxury, a lavish thing that we fund from leftovers of our budgets, not a plaything or an amusement or a pastime. Music is a basic need of human survival. Music is one of the ways we make sense of our lives. One of the ways in which we express feelings when we have no words. A way for us to understand things with our hearts when we can't with our minds. I'll give you one more example, the story of the most important concert of my life. I must tell you, I have played a little less than 1,000 concerts in my life so far. I've played in places that I thought were important. I like playing in Carnegie Hall. I enjoy playing in Paris. It made me very happy to please the critics in St. Petersburg. I played for people I thought were important, music critics of major newspapers, foreign heads of state. The most important concert of my entire life took place in a nursing home in Fargo, North Dakota, about 4 years ago. I was playing with a very dear friend of mine who is a violinist. We began, as we often do, with Aaron Copland's Sonata, which was written during World War II and dedicated to a young friend of Copland's, a young pilot who was shot down during the war. Now, we often talk to our audiences about the pieces we are going to play rather than providing them with written program notes. But in this case, because we began the concert with this piece, we decided to talk about the piece later in the program and to just come out and play the music without explanation. Midway through the piece, an elderly man seated in a wheelchair near the front of the concert hall began to weep. This man, whom I later met, was clearly a soldier. Even in his 70s, it was clear from his buzz-cut hair, square jaw, and general demeanor that he had spent a great deal of his life in the military. I thought it a little bit odd that someone would be moved to tears by that particular movement of that particular piece, but it wasn't the first time I've heard crying in a concert, and we went on with the concert and finished the piece. When we came out to play the next piece on the program, we decided to talk about both the first and second pieces, and we described the circumstances in which the Copeland was written and mentioned its dedication to a downed pilot. The man in the front of the audience became so disturbed that he had to leave the auditorium. I honestly figured that we would not see him again. But he did come backstage afterwards, tears and all, to explain himself. What he told us was this. During World War II, I was a pilot, and I was in an aerial combat situation where one of my team's planes was hit. I watched my friend bail out and watched his parachute open. But the Japanese planes, which had engaged us, returned and machine-gunned across the parachute cords so as to separate the parachute from the pilot. And I watched my friend drop away into the ocean, realizing that he was lost. I have not thought about this for many years, but during that first piece of music you played, this memory returned to me so vividly that it was as though I was reliving it. I didn't understand why this was happening. Why now? But then when you came out to explain that this piece of music was written to commemorate a lost pilot, it was a little more than I could handle. How does the music do that? How did it find those feelings and those memories in me? Remember the Greeks. Music is the study of invisible relationships between internal objects. Music allows us to move around those big invisible pieces of ourselves and rearrange our insides so that we can express what we feel, even when we can't talk about it. This concert in Fargo was the most important work I have ever done. For me to play for this old soldier and help him connect somehow with Aaron Copeland and to connect their memories of their lost friends. To help him remember and mourn his friend, this is my work. This is why music matters. The responsibility I will charge your sons and daughters with is this. If we were a medical school and you were here as a med student practicing appendectomies, you'd take your work very seriously because you would imagine that some night at 2 a.m., someone is going to waltz into your emergency room and you're going to have to save their life. Well, my friends, someday at 8 p.m., someone is going to walk into your concert hall and bring you a mind that is confused, a heart that is overwhelmed, a soul that is weary. Whether they go out whole again will depend partly on how well you do your craft. I'm not an entertainer. I'm a lot closer to a paramedic, a firefighter, a rescue worker. You're here to become a sort of therapist for the human soul, a spiritual version of a chiropractor, physical therapist, someone who works with our insides to see if they get things to line up, to see if we can come into harmony with ourselves and be healthy and happy and well. I'll include a link in the show notes to the full transcript of Karl's speech, and also a link to a recent guest on this podcast who spoke in detail about this concept of how society categorizes music, what it understands music's function to be, and how this has changed throughout history. If Karl's speech struck a chord with you, I would love to hear about it. You can always connect with me on email, mindy@mpetersonmusic.com. Facebook, Instagram, X, or LinkedIn. I'm Mindy Peterson, and I hope this inspires you to enhance your life with music.